The worst president in the history of our country took over, and look what happened to our country. Probably 20 million people. And you know, that's a little bit old, that chart. That chart's a couple of months old, and if you want to really see something that's said, take a look at what happened.
And there are some new questions this morning surrounding the assassination attempt against him. Florida Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna posted this photo on social media late last night. You can see it appears to show gunman Matthew Crooks walking around the rally site with the gun used to shoot Trump.
Well, it's definitely, the grace of God. It's definitely a testament to the power of prayer in events. I'm not saying me personally, but the effect, the invisible, powerful effect of the angelic realm and the grace of God operating in the affairs of men. It is influenced by our willingness to bow our head and invoke his blessing. This is a testament again to the power and efficacy of prayer guiding the affairs of men.
So we gotta move to the bus.
Obviously a huge security concern there. People were screaming. Still unclear exactly what happened, but a very big security concern there for former President Trump. Secret Service agents now surrounding him. And they are taking him off.
It's too brutal.
I mean, how do you want to do this? I mean, because my view obviously is on the play itself.
Yeah. Well, let's do this. Let's go ahead and discuss the play, as it is, and if there are like any particular quotes or speeches or interactions that come out, we can definitely use that to kind of maybe reference current politics. Just because what I really want to do is sort of have an in-depth discussion and analysis of this play, just because of the way that the characters interact, the justifications for why they do what they do, and the way they sort of react to the situations around them. It's very much a political thriller. I suppose you could say it's the Renaissance equivalent to one of those modern political thrillers that you see, like The Manchurian Candidate, for instance. So let's go ahead and get started here. So it took me 2 days to read Julius Caesar, and it's not a very long play to get through, but the first time it was just me, getting reacquainted with the play, because I haven't read it in over 10 years. So the first time it was just me trying to get acquainted with it, and then the second time was going over everything with the fine-tooth comb and highlighting and underlining certain lines. And mind you, the copy that I got, I actually had to go to a used bookstore to buy it. And what I really, really loved was the fact that the person who had it before me was making notes all over the place. So it kind of saved me the trouble of having to make notes myself, because the notes that were there pretty much aligned with what I've been thinking. But
right.
But yeah, I mean, so let's dive in. So Colin, what can you tell us about Julius Caesar, the play itself? Because this is one of those plays that he was writing when he was sort of in that middle period, like in the 1590s, right?
Well, I mean, I love the opening scene because the way it sets the whole scene up as being political. I mean, and you have Marulus and Flavius talking with the commoners,
Mm-hmm.
which, bearing in mind the time, I mean, and the fact that, of course, we're talking about English society, for tradesmen to talk back to noblemen in that way is quite something. And it really does set the whole scene of for the scenario, the basis of what the play is going to be about. And that opening scene is. I watched a film the other day, a few months ago, the one with Julius Caesar and Charlton Heston as Mark Antony from the 60s. And it was this opening scene was beautifully handled. I can't remember who directed that, but and so then so after that we get to meet Caesar, and then of course there's the famous soothsayer, and we get to meet Caesar doing his number, being Caesar,
being very noble and high and mighty and everything.
Yeah.
What I found so fascinating, because you mentioned it earlier, the fact that these commoners are basically talking back. It kind of, when I was going through it, it kind of seemed to me that the people they were doing this because they felt emboldened by Caesar, right? Because because over the course of his political career, he's sort of been seen as the champion of the ordinary man. The common man has someone who could finally stand up to to the big wigs and say, hey, it's not going to be like this. So so in my mind, when you read the way that I think one of them's like a cobbler and the other one's a carpenter, and they're telling him, hey, you need to get back to your trade. What are you doing, standing out here? And I mean, the way they're just speaking with boldness. I mean, my neck of the woods, we would say they're backsassing them, but it just shows just how just how devoted the people are to Caesar's, because they know that he's not he's not going to talk down to them. Whereas with the others, they're like saying, well, don't you remember Pompey? A few months ago, you guys were celebrating Pompey and welcoming him. You guys are pretty fickle, because it also, because not only that, but it also speaks to the fact that politics back then, as it is now, is a very fickle business. And and you're constantly having to work the crowd and kind of stay on their good side in order to maintain the popularity. Now, obviously, Roman politics operates pretty differently from politics today, but it still says something when you have the people clamoring behind you and offering their support, because it shows that whatever you're doing is certainly working. That was my impression of of the commoners just speaking so boldly to these bigwigs. So
and so if you do make the projection into modern, certainly American politics, it's Caesar is kind of like Trump. I mean,
yeah,
in that way. I mean, he's got these lower class people supporting him, which is ultimately going to menace the status quo in an odd way, because well, yes and no. I mean, is Caesar the status quo, or is Caesar the threat to the status quo?
And that's where, you know, that's where we meet, you know, Brutus and Cassius for the first time. It's because when they're having their conversation, it's over this possibility that Caesar may well, assume, a much more unsavory political office, that of the king. And what's so fascinating is the fact that, like I said earlier, with the people, because they love Caesar so much, because he speaks to them in a way that isn't condescending. You almost get the feeling that if Caesar were to come out and say, I declare myself a king, they wouldn't necessarily have an issue with it, because to them he's their he's like this benevolent ruler who's only out to guard their well-being, whereas the members of the Senate, or the members of the ruling class, they, to your point, they would see it as a threat, because at that point, if he were to crown himself as the king of the Romans, or the king of Rome, it would see a huge shift in their political influence, because they wouldn't have as much of a say in the political arena as they do now.
Well, yes, I mean, and also, I mean, it is a republic,
right?
So, in a republic, you don't have a king.
No, yeah, and the republic was started because the first Brutus did overthrow a king, the last king of the Romans, and they've been doing just fine for a few centuries, up until that point.
Yeah.
So sorry, go ahead. I'm going through this.
No,
the first act.
Yeah. No, what I was going to say is that if we look at the parallels between the modern American politics and the situation, one can see the threat that Brutus Cassius, in particular, see in Caesar. One can see that same threat in a lot of other people, in a lot of people in the States, vis-a-vis where Trump wants to go.
Yeah, and January 6th was was that moment where a lot of people saw him as a threat, because when I was reading that play, I think it was either Cassius. Yeah, I think it was Cassius who referenced that incident where Mark Antony offered the crown to Caesar 3 times and Caesar refused, and when I was reading it, I kind of got the feeling Cassius is sort of trying to twist the recounting of the story to say, well, Caesar had to do this in front of the people so that they wouldn't get suspicious, but he sort of has this this sort of conspiracy theory moment where he's like, well, not every a lot of people could couldn't see past it, but I could. I could definitely see the truth behind his actions. He really, really wanted the crown. So we've got to do something, or else, this might materialize. And given what happened, last month in Pennsylvania, you can't help but wonder if all of the rhetoric, before July of 2024 kind of, could have played a role in that, because they're still trying to figure out what the motive was for that kid to do what he did. And some news outlets are saying, well, it's because of the fact that you've got, news outlets like NBC and CNBC constantly saying Trump is a threat to our democracy. January 6th, should be an indication that he definitely wants to take America down the road to dictatorship. Something's got to be done to stop them. You kind of wonder if maybe that didn't kind of plant the seed to where people started thinking about, should we do, what the conspirators did in Julius Caesar and sort of plan something in order to preserve the republic at the cost of one man's life,
Yeah. Yeah, the kid is that the assassination attempt is well, I've got so many conspiracy theories about it, of course. Is how come he missed? Although I saw, I can't remember who it was, some gun nut, some gun expert reproduce it, and he said there is absolutely no way that you could you could be that accurate if you were trying to miss. If you were trying to not kill him, but just nick his ear, not even what's his name? That's the sniper. There was a film made about him.
I know who you're talking about.
Could be that accurate, I mean, a quarter of an inch, even from what is not a huge distance, but a quarter of an inch, to be able to just nick his ear. No, I mean, the guy missed.
Right. But I mean, it's so fascinating just to see all these explanations coming out. I remember, I remember watching a video. They were interviewing the priest who did the opening prayer at the session, and some people, attributed to divine intervention that's the reason why Trump survived that assassination attempt.
Well, yeah. Right.
So, but speaking of divine intervention, that does actually lead me to the point of where we meet the soothsayer, and the soothsayer, gives us that famous quote, one of the most famous quotes in the play, "Where the Ides of March." So can you kind of lead us down that path of what's going on here with that scene?
Well, it's part of the architecture of the play itself, by throwing in that line right at the beginning of that scene. And then it doesn't get mentioned until quite a lot later, but of course the audience is going to have it's going to resonate with the audience, and it's going to be hanging over the rest of the play up until the Ides of March come round.
Right. I mean, do you think it was done as a sort of plot device to kind of to kind of make it far more ominous, far more supernatural?
Yeah. It's a theatrical device intended to increase the the tension.
Right. It's I guess it's sort of like, it's not too different from from how modern filmmakers kind of use shots or music to kind of create tension in a scene, so that this is that this is building up to a moment.
Yeah. Yes, as you say, many filmmakers will use a similar device. So yeah, I mean, moving on. We're not going to have time to go through the whole play, and
I mean, we could pick out like the most important scenes that kind of go into them. But I just figured just give a mention to the Ides of March, because that's one of the things that a lot of people mention when they think of Julius Caesar, the play. Well, let me ask you this, because throughout the entire play, you kind of get the sense that there are two victims in this drama. I mean, obviously Caesar is one of them, because he's the one who ends up getting assassinated, but you also sort of get the feeling that Brutus himself has been victimized as well, because he's been taken and manipulated by Cassius and the others as sort of the figurehead for this conspiracy. But he even says himself, hey, I've got no grievances against the guy. I like him. I think he's an okay person. But throughout the play, he's sort of, I kind of get the feeling that that with Brutus, he's sort of spoon-fed, what the truth ought to be, and anything else that comes out would be, quote unquote, fake news, right? So it's like the conspirators only want Brutus to know what they want him to know, so they can sort of keep him on the path. Do you sort of get the same sentiment about Brutus?
Yes, Brutus is perhaps, I think, possibly the most interesting character, because he's torn one way, he's torn the other, and I think personally, I think he does what he does because the one line that he has, not because I loved Caesar less, but because I loved Rome more.
Right, and this is right before Mark Antony's speech too.
Yeah. And Brutus's speech to the proletariat, to the plebeians after the assassination, is, I think, a very is what he thinks, is what he really believes.
Right. He's not right. He's not playing up to the crowd. He's letting you know. He's putting his cards on the table and saying, "This is how I feel." And in a way, you can sort of feel sympathy for him, because at the end of the day, he's not doing this for ambition or anything else. He's doing this because he genuinely believes that he's trying to help his country. Now you contrast that with someone like Cassius. Cassius, he sort of reminds me of Iago from Othello, because there's really nothing about Cassius that I would say is sympathetic about him, right?
No, I mean, Cassius is the embodiment of ambition.
Right.
And with Caesar out of the way, maybe there's place for Cassius to have a bigger role in the running of Rome.
Did you well, let me ask you this, because this was a question that kept coming up over and over again as I was reading it. Did you get the sense that Cassius wasn't necessarily opposed to the concept of being a permanent dictator or king. It's just he had an issue with Caesar being in that role, and he wanted to occupy that role himself.
Well, I would put that down to actor's choice. You know, don't forget, these are plays, these are written to be performed, and there's a lot of interpretation, which when people read them, they make interpretative choices, which are, in fact, to my mind, the actor's choice. You know, so I would, that's one example which I would put to the text is there, you make of it what you will. So yes, if that's what you see, then that's what you see. What somebody else might see is what somebody else might see. So there is no definitive in that way.
So would you say there's something definitive about Brutus then? Because because with Brutus, I kind of get the feeling is what you see is what you get. You know, in reference to the speech that that he gives before Antony's.
Well, I mean, I'm just looking at a couple of lines here. But alas, Caesar, then we would come by, then we could come by, then, that we then could come by Caesar's spirit and not dismember Caesar. But alas, Caesar must bleed for it. And gentle friends, let us kill him boldly, but not wrathfully.
Right.
Let's carve him as a dish fit for the gods, not hew him as a carcass fit for hounds. And our hearts, as subtle masters do, stir up their servants into an act of rage, and after seeming to chide them, this shall make our purpose necessary and not envious.
But even then, you know, I sort of get the feeling there's a lot of reluctance when he's saying that. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Because as I'm reading it, it's sort of like him saying, "Well, yeah, we can do this, but we shouldn't treat him like a carcass. Like it almost elevates it to a sort of sacramental level. If, to use Christian." To use Christian language, because he's it's as if he's saying, well, let's do this, but we do this as a sacrificial offering, to the gods to preserve the republic, that they may accept Caesar, in turn, that they let us carry on as we've always done.
Let us be sacrificers, not butchers.
Right, exactly. So they borrow that priestly imagery in order to make it more palatable, make it more legitimate. Because a religious sacrificial offering, is going to be viewed, much differently than, say, someone who's just going around knifing people, willy-nilly. We've seen that happen quite a lot recently. So yeah, that's Brutus and Cassius right there. So yeah, where do we go from here? Because we know that that Brutus and Cassius they accomplished the deed, and then Brutus makes a speech afterwards, and he says that line, it's not because I love Caesar less, but I love Rome more. And then Mark Antony gives that very, very famous speech. It was actually the speech that I had to recite when we were studying Julius Caesar in school. And fun fact, there was a requirement we all had to dress up too. So imagine a bunch of 14 and 15-year-olds going into English class wearing togas and having garlands on their head because we were all doing a recitation of Mark Antony's speech. So can you walk us through that, because it's such a compelling speech, and it's one of those that you can understand why it's considered one of the best in English literature.
Yes, but one has to keep it in context of Brutus's speech as well.
Right. Yeah, because you can't read it in isolation because Antony is I mean, because when you look at the speech, if you read it by itself, you can sort of get it, but it's not entirely clear. But when you read it in context of Brutus's speech, like you said, it makes a lot more sense because it's sort of like a presidential debate, or televised debate. You know, you can't just take one candidate's speech and just like read it by itself. They're responding to what the other person's saying. So, yeah, I totally agree with you on that one.
Technically, there's something which is really interesting, which has always fascinated me, is that Brutus's speech is in prose and Antony's speech is in verse.
Mm-hmm.
Now, from a technical actor's point of view, that's interesting because Brutus's speech is appealing to ultimately to the intellect,
Mm-hmm.
to the rational, whereas Antony's speech is appealing to the emotional, which is why, in fact, I think he wins. Because because that's how politics works.
Right. You're playing to the gallery.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know, well, Mark Antony's speech is something that I use in my one-man online play called Shakespeare Unbound. I don't know if you've come across that, but I can send you the link to the website.
Yeah, I mean, and I'll definitely put it in the description below so people can check that out. And I've also checked out the channel as well that you have on YouTube. And I believe I mentioned this the last time we spoke, but with that speech that Mark Antony has given to the people, I mean, obviously he's playing to the gallery, and he's saying, you know, remember, you know, Caesar loved you and you loved Caesar. And you know, but when he's responding to Brutus, I mean, because he keeps punctuating, and he's saying, you know, and Brutus is an honorable man, and I think when we spoke, you kind of get the feeling that there's a bit of sarcasm in Antony's tone as he's saying this, because
it's dripping with sarcasm.
Yeah, exactly, because. You know, because here you've got Brutus giving this speech. He's very stoic. He's very, like you said, he's very intellectual. He's trying to make people see what the objective is, whereas Antony is appealing to the subjective. And you know, being sarcastic will definitely kind of get the point across far better than, you know, just being a cut and dry speech, as it were.
Yeah, I mean, I could go through as an actor and give the technical ways in which Shakespeare.
Yeah, please do so. Please do so.
Well,
friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. The evil that men do lives after them. The good is often interred with their bones. So let it be with Caesar. The noble Brutus have told you Caesar was ambitious. If it was so, it was a grievous fault. Grievously hath Caesar answered it. Here, under leave of Brutus and the rest, for Brutus is an honorable man, so are they all honorable men. Come I to speak in Caesar's funeral. He was my friend, faithful and just to me. But Brutus says he was ambitious. And Brutus is an honorable man. He hath brought many captives home to Rome, whose ransoms did the general coffers fill. Did this in Caesar seem ambitious, when that the poor have cried, Caesar hath wept? Ambition should be made of sterner stuff. Yet Brutus says he was ambitious. And Brutus is an honorable man. You all did see that on the Lupercal I thrice presented him a kingly crown which he did thrice refuse. Was this ambition? Yet Brutus says he was ambitious. And sure, he is an honorable man. I speak not to disprove what Brutus spoke, but here I am to speak what I do know. You all did love him once, not without cause. What cause withholds you then to mourn for him? Judgment, thou art fled to brutish beasts, and men have lost their reason. Bear with me. My heart is there with Caesar, and I must pause till it come back to me.
Well, I'll have to bring the speech up, and where's it gone? There it is. Okay. Well, iambic pentameter, 5 beats to the bar, weak strong. Shakespeare uses this, and this is one speech where he uses it absolutely so blatantly. Okay. So you have friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. So you have friends, Romans. Now, in many big speeches, you don't start with an I am, a weak strong. You start with either 2 strongs or a strong weak.
Right.
Here you start with a trochee, which is a spondee, sorry, which is 2 strongs. Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. So now that this is the first one that takes us kind of by surprise, because the 4th beat is me. And it falls on a strong beat. Well, yes, because you've listened to Brutus, now listen to me. So, friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. Lend me your ears. And I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. Okay, so again, you have on that 4th beat, you have not. And he has promised Brutus that he will not praise Caesar. So he's saying, by putting the not on a strong beat, he is emphasizing that this is not what he's going to do. I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. And the evil that men do lives after them. Okay, the good is oft interred with their bones, so let it be with Caesar. The noble Brutus hath told you Caesar was ambitious. Now, this is the first use of the word ambitious, and it falls on the end of the verse line, so it stands out. The noble Brutus hath told you Caesar was ambitious. If it were so, it was a grievous fault, and grievously hath Caesar answered it. Here, under leave of Brutus and the rest, again, you see that and falling on a fourth beat, a strong beat. For Brutus is an honorable man. Now, again, we have an is on a strong beat, and you'll see this gets repeated further down. What you were talking about, the sarcasm starts to become laid on with a trowel. So are they all honorable men. So we have the repetition of honorable. So we've introduced ambitious. Now we're hitting the honorable, repeating it. Come I to speak in Caesar's funeral. He was my friend, faithful and just to me. But Brutus says he was ambitious. Notice where that says was.
Mm-hmm.
Because it really reinforces that, you know, really? That's what he says? You know, if you just say, but Brutus says he was ambitious, it doesn't have the same power that hitting the says does, because it falls on a strong beat. But Brutus says he was ambitious. And Brutus is an honorable man. And so you see the way that the choice of the words on the strong beats is really ramping up the sarcasm in a way that prose can't. Only verse can do this. He hath brought many captives home to Rome, whose ransoms did the general coffers fill. Did this in Caesar seem ambitious? Again, the repetition of the ambitious. When that the poor have cried, Caesar hath wept, ambition should be made of sterner stuff. Yet Brutus says he was ambitious, and Brutus is an honorable man. The repetition of those lines, the placing of the words like says and is on strong beats really increases the way this speech has its power. You all did see that on the Lupercal I thrice presented him a kingly crown, which he did thrice refuse. Was this ambition? Yet Brutus says he was ambitious. And sure, he is an honorable man.
It's just so funny because Brutus is standing right there as he's giving that speech. That's what makes it so funny. So real quickly, let me ask you this: is he also putting the emphasis on Brutus as well as is when he's talking? Because because he also wants to like point, say, well, this man here says he's ambitious, and Brutus is an honorable man.
Yep. Because you've got the 5 beats. 1, Brutus is an honorable man. So you've got the 5 beats.
Okay.
And so yes, if you do my workshop as to what the function of the 5 beats, the first is there to introduce, the second to reinforce or provide a contrapoint. The third is the middle line of the beat, middle beat of the line, so it's the balance point. The 4th beat is there to lead into the 5th beat, which is what the which is the most important beat in the
Right.
line.
To drive the point home, as it were.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so on. I mean, so that's how I break down a Shakespeare verse speech, because each beat has a function, and in this particular speech is one where he has taken that use of the 5 beats of each line to the nth degree. Yeah, but Brutus says he was ambitious, and sure, he is an honorable man. I mean, yeah, by the time you get to about 2/3 of the way through the speech, and he said nothing. I mean, that's what's so brilliant. All he said is, Brutus is an honorable man. Yeah, sure. I mean, it's like it's right. I mean, it says the exact opposite to what you're saying.
What I also love about Antony's speech is he basically takes the basic essence of Brutus's speech and kind of inverts it. So whereas Brutus's speech is sort of saying, well, I'm actually not a bad guy. Like, Caesar's not a bad guy too, but he had to go because he wanted to make himself king. Whereas Antony just takes, he takes Brutus's speech and kind of repackages them and kind of turns it against Brutus himself, which is so hilarious. And then the next line in the speech is, what was it? He says, "I speak not to disprove what Brutus spoke, but here I am to speak what I do know." It's one of those things where it's like, where if you're in the audience, you're like, oh, I'm starting to catch on. I'm starting to see what you're doing here. And Brutus is probably just sitting there thinking, oh my God, like, that's my speech. Like, he's using it against me. Like, he's probably like looking around, looking for the exits at this point. But another thing I wanted to ask you about was the next speech that he gives is where he reads the will. He says, "If you have tears, we're prepared to shed them now," because he's still following, or I should say, Shakespeare is still using that blank verse format to kind of drive the point home. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because this is after Antony says, no, I can't read the will to you. You guys aren't ready yet, and the people are getting worked up, and they're saying, come on, read the will, or we're gonna kick your ass. And he's like, all right, I'll read it to you because you guys are so nice about it.
Well, the only way I can do it is by doing it because it's not actually a speech I've studied to the point of I have studied. If you have tears, prepare to shed them now. Okay, you all do know this mantle. I remember the first time ever Caesar put it on. It was on a summer's evening in his tent, the day he overcame the Nerville. Look in this place ran Cassius' dagger through. See what a rent the envious Casca made. Through this the well-beloved Brutus stabbed, and as he plucked his cursed steel away, mark how the blood of Caesar followed it as rushing out of doors to be resolved if Brutus so unkindly knocked or no. For Brutus, as you know, was Caesar's angel judge. O you gods, how dearly Caesar loved him. This was the most unkindest cut of all. For when the noble Caesar saw him stab, ingratitude more strong than traitor's arms quite vanquished him, then burst his mighty heart, and in his mantle muffling up his face, even at the base of pompous statue, which all the while ran blood, great Caesar fell. Oh, what a fall was there, my countrymen! Then I and you and all of us fell down, whilst bloody treason flourished over us. Oh, now you weep, and I perceive you feel the dint of pity. These are gracious drops, kind soul. What weep you when you but behold our Caesar's vesture wounded? Look you there, look you here. Here is himself marred, as you see with traitors.
Good Lord. Like he just doesn't stop, does he? Like he just keeps hammering home that point.
Yeah.
Because because he wants people to know, hey, the people, people like Brutus and Cassius who've been gaslighting you this entire time, they're the guys you should be going after. And look, here's his body, and he pulls back the veil to show his dead body with all the stab wounds. So let me ask you this: like, what would you say that Antony's speech is one of the easiest out of Shakespeare's speeches to perform, or is it pretty difficult? Because it sounds like you would need to know how to hit those beats.
Well, I would say that once you have mastered the technique of following iambic pentameter, it's actually one of the easiest, because there is very little. Well, one of the things I say in my workshop is, particularly when it comes to iambic pentameter or iambic, verse sections, if it's difficult to say, it's because the character is having difficulty expressing himself. So if it's difficult to follow the iambic pentameter, it becomes difficult to say. And if it's so that means the character is having difficulty expressing himself. You see this, there's a speech I compare this speech to in one of Hamlet's speeches, "Oh, what a rogue and peasant slave am I," which is full of long lines, short lines, lines where you really cannot maintain the iambic pentameter. I mean, it would just be silly. I mean, and so it becomes. Well, Shakespeare keeps stripping the actor up in the Hamlet speech, whereas here Antony is on eloquence, rhetorical, in a rhetorical chariot, if you like. And he's galloping. He's galloping free. There isn't one speech in that, one line in that speech which is not perfect iambic pentameter. And if you follow those perfect iambic pentameter lines and the strong beats, everything you need is there.
Is it easy to master, or does it take you a while to sort of get familiar with it?
Well, for me personally, with 30-40 years of doing this, it's easy. I could sight read that speech with no problem.
But for someone younger or someone who's getting into acting, would you say it takes a little bit more time?
Yeah, well, I mean, all Shakespeare's verse speeches need study. I mean, you cannot sight read Shakespeare. I mean, Well, I make the analogy with classical music. I mean, few are the pianists who could sit down and sight read Mozart piano concerto, literally sight read.
Yeah.
Never having seen it. You need a very a great deal of experience and training and skill, not to mention talent, to be able to do that, to sight read Mozart. And the same is true of Shakespeare. I mean, people set up, let's have a reading group and we'll all sit around and read Shakespeare. I go, oh my God, please. Because it's impossible. No, it's not impossible. I mean, well, it is impossible unless you. It is impossible if you haven't been trained to do so.
And do you think it's? I mean, do you think it's the responsibility of the person who who's leading that to know how to approach Shakespeare's blank verse in order to guide others to kind of read it in a similar way?
Yeah. Okay. Yes. I mean, I suppose, amass a group of people around me and work with them, and within a few sessions get to the point where we could read it in a way that I mean, one of the things is the way Shakespeare distorts grammar and manipulates syntax. Now, there is another person in the world who does that these days, and that's Trump. He distorts grammar and manipulates syntax because when he's speaking, he wants certain words to stand out. And this is one of the reasons why, when you take his speeches and actually print them out, they make absolutely no sense at all. Because they were designed to be, designed. That's probably giving him too much credit. But they were, they were extemporary, and they were spoken. And he manipulates the grammar. He distorts grammar, or he manipulates syntax so that certain words will stand out. And also he uses repetition. I mean, these are very much techniques that Shakespeare uses, in fact.
Right. So like with the Mark Antony speech with the Friends, Romans, Countrymen, that technique you were talking about, where he's emphasizing certain words, that's pretty much the same as what Trump is doing whenever he's giving doing these rallies, right?
Yeah. Except that Shakespeare obviously does it with a great deal more eloquence and poetry. But the techniques are the same. Yeah.
I mean, would you also say that the outcome is the same as well? Because in both of these instances, they're meant to evoke emotion. Because I mean, like in Mark Antony's speech, for instance, he gets the Roman citizens riled up to where they tear through the streets of Rome looking for the conspirators, and they end up killing, one guy who happens to share the same name as the conspirators. And in the case of here in the U.S., I mean, you get people all riled up and they're, chanting his name. And, well, in the case of January 6th, they kind of go and, attack, the halls of Congress.
Yeah. I mean, I'm actually from, as I say, I've been following American politics since 1963. I'm actually surprised that there haven't been more incidences of mob violence post a Trump rally. Yeah.
So, so sorry. So I want to go back to what you're saying before, because you said that with Trump, he's very much following the similar model that Shakespeare uses in his speech, or in his dramas, I should say. Have you seen any other president following something similar, or is this something that's unique to Trump?
See, unique to Trump.
Okay.
I mean, you have Obama, who was one of the best orators I think I've ever seen, but it goes way over the heads of the sort of people who follow Trump.
So in other words, Obama's speech would have been like Brutus's speech, right? It's very much about the intellect.
Yeah, maybe, yes, yeah.
What about Reagan? Because I know Reagan has this reputation for being the great communicator. Is there anything about him that stands out in particular that you could sort of see a bit of Shakespeare in?
He was an actor, of course, and yeah, people. I never really saw it. People said, "Oh, he's such a wonderful communicator." Well, I mean, so. I had such antithesis for his politics that it was kind of maybe difficult for me to be objective about how good he was as a communicator and speech maker. He certainly had a sense of humor. Mm-hmm. That's true. I mean, there's lots of jokes about. He told lots of jokes, and had a good sense of timing. Yeah. But and I guess he was a likable sort of guy, if you like that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. Whereas, I mean, there's no way you can say Trump is a likable sort of guy. Yeah. He's, I mean, and the cult that follows him is hard to believe.
Would you say that the devotion that centered around Trump, would you say that that's sort of similar to the way that the comic people had for Caesar in this play?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, you blocks, you stones, you worse than senseless things. He says Marulus, I think, who says that. It's you have this mindless. You are following somebody mindlessly, which, yes, one can say that about Trump's followers.
And I bring that up because obviously, we see what happens in the aftermath of the speech that Mark Antony delivers, but we've also seen in recent history what's happened there, which then leads me to to the end of the play where everything converges at the Battle of Philippi, because at the Battle of Philippi, that's when the conspirators they kind of realize that the game is up and that they can no longer run, they can't win anymore. And what's ironic is the fact that what they tried to do to save the Republic ends up killing it, and they end up giving birth to the Roman Empire later on. Mm-hmm. what were your thoughts about the end of the play? Did you have any particular feelings, or did you think it could have ended differently, or what?
Uh,
It's a loaded question.
Shakespeare always has problems with the ends of the plays. I mean, some of the ends are so lame. And Measure for Measure, Twelfth Night. I mean, you know, they sort of
They just peter out.
I don't know. I mean, I think that there's a sort of inevitability. It's a bit like Richard III. There's a sort of inevitability to the end, and everything comes to a sort of halt, and it is what it is.
Yeah, because he is following the historical sources, as it were. So he's kind of hemmed in on that. But I did want to go back to a point you made earlier, because I've always thought that Shakespeare could have ended his plays a lot better. But you kind of feel like, you kind of feel like throughout the entire play, you kind of get this build up, and you're anticipating something great, and then it kind of just plateaus, and you just say to yourself, well, okay, what was that all about? Because I heard a joke once where someone said, like, the best way to end a Shakespeare play is for everybody to die. That's how you know it's a good ending, is because everybody just dies.
It depends. Everybody to die or everybody to get married, depending on whether it's comedy or a tragedy.
Yeah, that's right. You either die or you get married. I think that's what the punchline was.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I think the end is a bit weak. I mean, having said that, it is what it is, you know.
Yeah.
One can't second guess Shakespeare, and those who try are doomed to failure. So, you know.
So let me ask you this. So would you consider Julius Caesar one of Shakespeare's best plays, or would you consider it one of his weaker ones? Like, in your honest opinion.
I have difficulty making qualitative comparisons because every Shakespeare play is a work of genius. So in what it is, and I mean every speech. I mean, looking at that Mark Antony speech, the way it's constructed, the way the linguistic orchestration, the use of rhetoric, the use of metaphor, simile, assonance, alliteration, all combined into a through line of 20, 30, 40, 50 lines. And I just think that I hate what people do to Shakespeare, because There's a man called William Pole who was a Shakespeare critic in the 1920s.
Mhm.
And he said something which struck me when I read his book. I've never forgotten it. The person who thinks they are greater than Shakespeare is not aware of their own limitations.
I remember hearing that. Yeah.
And I think that's beautiful. That sums it up perfectly, because and I wish more theater directors would take that on board, because
do you sort of see that as a common occurrence with modern theater today, where they kind of put their own spin on Shakespeare and think that they can do a much better job interpreting it than previous interpretations, or even
and I mean, that has been the case since the 1920s, when William Pole made that remark, because but when you set Hamlet in Stalinist Russia, I mean, we're capable, as audience members, we're capable of making the connection to our own lives. We don't need the director and the designer ramming it down our throats.
So in other words, I mean, there's no need to experiment, just play it straight, right?
Well, yes. Well, one of the things about Shakespeare, one of the things that I think is brilliant about Shakespeare is the universality. So once you specifically place it in Stalinist Russia in the 1920s, for example, you are moving away from that universality. And I'll tell you a story about the Romeo and Juliet, the Baz Luhrmann Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah.
When I saw the posters, I was hugely disappointed, because Baz Luhrmann is a director that I admire and respect greatly. And I saw the posters and I went, oh, fuck. Baz, come on. And I refused to watch it. I refused absolutely to watch it. And I have a friend, still a friend, in fact, he's now my agent, and who came round one day with the VHS. This is how long ago it was.
I remember VHS tapes, don't worry.
And a bottle of scotch. And that shows how well he knows me. And he said, if you want the bottle of scotch, you're going to watch the tape. Well, I mean, who's going to turn down a bottle of scotch? Okay,
Yeah.
So we put the VHS cassette in the machine, and we cracked open the bottle of scotch, and we got some ice, and we had a glass, and pressed the play button. And in 2 minutes, I was hooked completely.
Right.
And I thought it was brilliant. I thought the interpretation was absolutely brilliant. Yeah, but it's modern. No. But the thing is, where is it? Have you seen it?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah. Where's it set?
I mean, it kind of looks like it might be California or something.
Well, yeah, it could be California, it could be South Africa, it could be Australia. It's
nondescript. Yeah.
Yeah, it has that universality about it. It's somewhere, but nowhere. And that's what makes it work. And then I saw, many years later, I came across the DVD in a charity shop. So I bought it for something like £5, probably. And there was, you know, the DVDs sometimes have the bonus. And there was an interview with him on the bonus. There's a bonus DVD with an interview with him and some of the other actors as well. And so I watched that, and he told the story of how there was a major producer wanted DiCaprio to do Romeo, and was willing to put money up behind it. Just, you know, DiCaprio and Romeo in Romeo and Juliet. I think it was just after Titanic. So, you know, and so they approached Baz and said, "Would you like to direct it? And, yeah, what's the budget, etc." And he said, you know, one thing led to another, and I suddenly realized, fuck it, I'm going to be directing Romeo and Juliet. Oh shit! Everybody's directed Romeo and Juliet. Yeah, and the mistake I think that most directors make is everybody has directed Romeo and Juliet. What can I do to put my stamp on it?
Yeah.
And he said, okay, so what I did was I had them type up the script as a film script, not as a, you know, Shakespeare type book, but as a film script, you know, with its central and, you know, so it looked like any other film script.
Yeah, with the shots and everything and all that stuff. Yeah.
Well, they weren't at shots by the year yet, but yeah. And I said to my secretary, I'm not taking any calls, and I'm having no visitors for 3 days. And I locked myself in my office, and I read the script, and I cleared my mind of every Romeo and Juliet I had ever seen, and everything I had ever thought about it. And I sat down and I read the script, and I let the images come to me from the script. That's why it worked. Because it was organic. Because it was the script that was it was the script that was the motivator.
Right. He wasn't going in with like a predetermined idea of what he wanted to do with it. He kind of let the script kind of speak for itself.
Yeah. And so to my mind, that's why it works, because it's come from the script. And so the same would be true with Julius Caesar. You know, if you're going to mount Julius Caesar, yeah, you've done a lot of research into the background, but it's the script. What you're putting on stage is not the history. What you're putting on stage is the script. And it's a script. Yeah.
Right, because at the end of the day, you're telling the story that's on the script, not, you know, not retelling something that you read in a history book, as it were.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not Plutarch's Lives as translated by Sir Thomas North. I've become a great fan of Dennis McCarthy, who has done a huge amount of work into how much of Shakespeare and and Sir Thomas North. There is huge sections of work, lines, huge number of lines that exist really only in Thomas North and Shakespeare. They exist post because people have been quoting Shakespeare ever since, but and Thomas North was 30 years Shakespeare's senior. And Thomas North translated Plutarch's Lives. And Plutarch's Lives is the base for what's called the Roman plays in Shakespeare. And Dennis McCarthy's book, Sir Thomas North, is
Yep, I can see it.
it's quite a tome. And he just lists. It's just a lot of it is just lists of what you find in North and what you find in Shakespeare. And he used the software, the same software that was used to trap the Unabomber, which is a plagiarism software, and it's used by universities to find out if people who are writing their masters have been plagiarizing. I'm gonna have to feed these dogs.
No, you're good. So yeah, I really can't thank you enough for having to deal with all the technical issues, but we finally got this episode recorded. And like I said, I do plan on having you come back pretty soon, because I do want to take a look at King Lear. I got to find the book first, because I know it's here somewhere. I just got to find it, and then I got to reread it again, and it's gonna take me a while, at least a month. But I would love to have you come back to talk about King Lear. But yeah, other than that, thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate it, Colin.
Okay. Well, good luck with it. And speak again soon.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say I would like to do an episode, because what I find so fascinating is the fact that Shakespeare, he wrote a lot of Roman plays, but he didn't write any Greek plays. And having read a little bit of Plutarch's Lives, I wonder, how would Shakespeare approach a character like Alexander the Great? So hopefully that's something we can sort of discuss later on down the road, because I think that would be a great thought experiment right there.
Oh, right, yeah. I'm not particularly familiar with Greek plays, so yeah.
Excellent. All right, Colin. Okay. Well, have a great evening. Take care.
Okay.
The only general honest thought of common good to all made one of them. His life was gentle. The elements so mixed in him that nature might stand up and say to all the world, this was a man.